How to Date Yourself, Self-Care for the Christian Woman Battling Lust. Today I'm here with my girl, Kia Stevens. She's here to teach us how to overcome that lie that our worth is tied up in our relationships and instead fall in love with the woman God has created each of us to be. So Kia is the wife and homeschooling mama of 2 boys, and she's passionate about helping women who know God as Father. For this reason, she created the Father Swap blog, and it is a source of encouragement, healing, and practical wisdom for women dealing with the effects of a physically or emotionally absent father. Each week, through practical and biblically sound teaching, she encourages women to exchange their father wounds for the love of God the Father. Kia and I can both testify that dating ourselves has definitely led us into a deeper awareness of our God-given purpose, along with giving us the confidence, wholeness, and peace that comes from knowing that you are intimately loved and known by God the Father. So stick around to hear her 6 steps to dating yourself, as well as how you can download Kia's free ebook, Hope for the Woman with Father Wounds. Kia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Titania. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here. And I'm super excited to get into the topic of today's show, which is how to date yourself. It's self-care for the Christian woman battling lust. So tell me a little bit about what was your inspiration behind this topic? Like, what made you create this article, How to Date Yourself?
Well, it's crazy. You know, I was watching a video with Pastor Stephen Furtick and Bishop T.D. Jakes, and he was actually on a promotional tour for his book, Soar, and which is not even about dating yourself. It's about entrepreneurship. But as I was listening to him, he said this quote, and I'm going to read it because it was just so profound, and I stopped and was like, oh my gosh, I need to write about that. But he said, I am in touch with myself in a way that a lot of people are not. I know me. I've dated me. You know, when you date somebody, you explore them to see who they are. Most people are so busy dating other people, they've never dated themselves. And after he said that, I was like, stop the press, you know. I got to write about this because I was like, I have spent a lot of time trying to date other people and not really knowing who I was. And I totally knew what he was saying. And I felt like this would be a great blog post. I felt like it could be explored. That one little statement, those 3 sentences could totally be explored for other women, and that I could give them some practical ways of dating themselves if they weren't sure where to begin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely hits home with me as well, because I know that as a new Christian, where God dealt with me or really had me come into the faith is dealing with my own need for like being loved, and a lot of that was really tied into a relationship that I was in at the time, and God was calling me to leave that relationship, but I couldn't because I had invested so much of to me, it's just like so much of my worth and so much of my feeling loved came out of that relationship. And so when God walked me through the process of like coming to know who I am or who He's created me to be, you know, dating myself, it was definitely an eye opener. And I began to see that there were more parts to me than my sexuality, than just being in a relationship with other people. And yeah, I just really want other women to experience that as well, because once you go through that, it's a whole new world. So tell us, how can dating ourselves be something that helps us on a spiritual level?
Well, I think that it helps you. One, you got to know who you are. Who are you outside of a relationship? Like, that's something that has to be explored and discovered prior to ever coupling up. And with this particular post, I opened the post by quoting someone that I heard say, I always had a boyfriend. I was always in a relationship. And the person I was talking about, she wasn't the first person that I ever heard say something like that. I have heard many women say that. I have been that woman where I was constantly coupled up with someone. But the problem with that was when you are actually by yourself, or when you break up, you don't know who in the world you are. Like you alluded to earlier, you lose yourself. You can't function. Of course, breakups are going to be difficult, but they shouldn't debilitate you. They shouldn't have you like withdrawing from society and covering your head and burying yourself in your bed and, eating Ben and Jerry for months, maybe a day. Maybe a day, but not a month. Who are you? And I think that we discover who we are when we're alone, when it's just us and God, and he's able to speak to us, when we can get rid of all the noise and all of the chatter, social media, and constantly got to be moving and going, even constantly serving in the church sometimes, because I grew up in the church. But sometimes we just need to get alone and be by ourselves, and God, read the Bible, journal, those types of things. Be still before God, get on our knees, and do things that maybe for some of us may feel different and new. But those are the times where God can really begin to speak to us through the scriptures, and sometimes through still small voice, a voice that we can hear in our head, in our knower.
So yeah, it reminds me of when you get to talking about like just staying yourself and knowing more about yourself and putting yourself in these different situations so you can get to know yourself. It reminds me of this quote. I'm not sure who was the first person to say it, but God is working in us and developing and pouring into us when we move out of our comfort zones. Like when we move out of the comfort zone into like this unknown, that's when God really starts, building those faith muscles, giving us things or stirring up things within us that we didn't even know were there. And just even in that time, relying on God more, depending on God more, we come to see more spiritual fruit, or more of the adventure of knowing God and being in relationship with God. So I also, like, I was going through this topic and I was thinking, like, there's going to be women who are married that are going to think, this is not for me. So like, what do you think? Like, do you think only that single women should date themselves?
No. Married women, we might need to be at the top of the list, because the temptation is when you get married to lose yourself in the identity of the marriage, or to lose yourself serving your spouse and, or serving your kids when you have kids, and just really feeling lost when you don't have those things. And I think I'm approaching my 15th year of marriage. What?
That's nice.
But I think had I known some of the things that I know now, I would have been a lot stronger going into the marriage, and just during the marriage. You're going to need times alone. When you get married, you need times of alone, times of refreshing. Do you like to paint? Do you like to be creative? Do you like to write? Do you like to sing? What is it that lights your passion and your fire and gives you a burst of energy that you don't have to work up, but you would do for free? You would do it until you die. What is that? Because it cannot be solely wrapped up in your marriage. It cannot be dependent upon your spouse. And there's a temptation to lose yourself and to feel as if your worth is wrapped up in the marriage, which is the same temptation of being single and feeling like your worth is wrapped up in your relationship. But we're people outside of being married. God calls us daughter. He says we're royal, we're unique. He gave us gifts and talents and abilities, and we have a unique purpose that is that can exist outside of our union with our spouse. Not to take anything away from being married, because I love my husband and I'm submitted to my husband, but I'm keenly aware of the things that refresh me and refuel me and that make me unique.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be, because too, if you do fall into, it's when we do fall into that trap of just finding our identities in our marriage. It's when we start to have those problems too, because it's kind of like we're almost expecting more out of our husband and out of that relationship that we can really spiritually expect from somebody who is not God, because only God can fill us. And then too, like you said, when we are in touch with who we are as a person within that marriage, and we do have those times of refreshing, and we do understand what makes us tick, and under what circumstances we best operate, then we're not only going to be able to be the best wife that we can be, we can be the best mom we can be, best whatever it is, even outside of that marriage, writer or entrepreneur or, school teacher, whoever or whatever you're doing, you're going to be the best at that too. And so I definitely agree with you. That's really good. Like just keeping, just not losing yourself in whatever relationship status or place you are in life.
And I think I was gonna just say, as your seasons in life change, and I especially in marriage, I'm going into 15 years, which is a while, but it's not a long while. But you have different seasons where you're newly married and you might be doing a lot of things together. Then you get that first child, or there's a promotion, there's more job requirements for your spouse, or maybe one spouse comes home and the other spouse is working, or one spouse is traveling. You have got to know how to love on yourself in those times where you and your spouse are going through different changes that naturally occur in a marriage. And most certainly when the kids come, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, I'm preparing myself.
You got to date yourself, because your husband may come home tired. You got little people running around, Legos everywhere. You got to know how to date yourself. And so for married women, definitely, and single women preparing for a marriage, definitely, the more you know about yourself, the better off you'll be going into the marriage.
So true. I'm just so grateful that, because I used to be very clingy and very tied up in relationships. When I was dating somebody, I always wanted to be around that person. I always wanted to be doing whatever with that person. And just as God took me out of that, and now as I went to this marriage, aware and able to keep my identity of who I am separate from that other person, just I could enjoy the other person more. I can enjoy, the Lord more, because that person wasn't my idol. And again, when we make sure that our spouses don't become our idols, then we, facilitate this better relationship, or this better conditions for our marriage. And so I'm so glad we talked about this, because I think it's important to whether you're single now or married now to date yourselves, but also I want the single ladies who have a desire to be married to hear this, so they understand how important it is to already be, down with yourself, down with who God created you to be, as you prepare to go into this relationship or marriage when that time comes. And so, go ahead.
I was thinking about a time in my life right before I met my husband. There was a guy. I shouldn't say this, but I kind of call him like a filler. When you think of a filler, like something to take up space.
Yeah.
And so that's what this guy kind of was for me. Like, he was in my life. We talked on the phone. We went out a couple times. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't see myself marrying this person, or I don't perceive that this is going to be a long-term type relationship. But he is occupying space right now. He's giving me attention. He's, and even though I was like, when you have that, like,
Yeah.
And one night he said, "Do you want me to stop calling you?" And there was a fear. There was a fear I had inside of saying yes. because I was being fearful of being alone and fearful of not having somebody in that space where I had somebody. But I guess it was the Holy Spirit that helped me to say yes. And it was probably the best thing I could have done, because that was like a yes to me, a yes to saying, I'm not going to rely on this filler. I'm going to be okay by myself. And I will function. I will survive. I will live. I will be okay. So I think just being willing to face that fear of being by yourself, and then knowing what to fill that space with, which is the premise of what we're talking about in terms of how to date yourself.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, so tell us, let's get right into it now. Now that we know why it's so important and why it's so critical to our spiritual health and to our relationships. Go ahead and tell us like the first step or the first thing we can do to start dating ourselves.
Sure. Well, the first step would definitely just be to talk to God. And I think, that it could be taken as, I hear this all the time, especially if you grew up in the church, but seriously, like, talk to him the way I'm talking to you. Being very honest about your feelings. If you are apprehensive about letting these filler men go, saying, God, I feel apprehensive about letting these filler men go. They have served me well. I enjoy the attention I'm getting. I enjoy the gifts. I enjoy the dates. I don't want to be alone. I'm afraid if I let them go, I won't have any prospects for marriage. I'm enjoying the sex. Whatever it is, I think that sometimes we perceive God to be someone that we have to sugarcoat our prayers to, or put up these barriers where we can't be gut-wrenchingly honest with God, but we can. And that's the type of prayer that begins to really open the door to a relationship we've never imagined with God. So start there. He's our creator. He knows us. He knows everything about us. And then the next thing that I would say would be to pay attention. Pay attention to the things that you're good at, what you have a proclivity to. I've always been a writer. And now that I think about it, I was writing when I was in middle school. I was writing when I was in high school. I was writing when I was in college. So this is something that every juncture in my life, if I pay attention, I can say to myself, you know what, self, you should be writing. Let's make some time for that. Can we do 5 minutes a day? Can we do 15 minutes a day? Can we do 30 minutes a week? How can I begin to make space for the things in my life that I have already identified I'm good at, I enjoy? What are people in my life telling me? Are my friends saying, girl, you did that macaroni and cheese? Or, man, when you do my hair, or when you do those flat twists, oh my gosh. That the way you put that outfit together, I wish I could do something like that, or you're so good at thrifting. Help me thrift. People are constantly kind of being prophetic, I would almost say, or they're speaking into our lives and telling us things that we may not readily recognize about ourselves. But if we stop and pay attention and listen, we'll hear some of the same things over and over and over again. And then we'll talk to God about it, like, God, she said my mac and cheese is so good. What else should I be doing? Is there something else? Should I be more hospitable, God? Should I open up my home? Should I have a group of women over to my house, a group of single ladies, and we can just talk about our journey being single? There's so many clues.
I just want to amen both of those, talking to God and then just paying attention to what where he's gifted you. Just speaking from my own experience, when God took me through that very redemptive process of, taking me out of that place where I was very bound to sexual sin and just far from God in general. As he began to pull me closer to him, he began to provide these different opportunities that I couldn't have, created for myself, just being in this place or positioning myself. Like when I followed God, I positioned myself to be in these places and have these opportunities that I couldn't create for myself. And then I did learn, or I did get training, and I did get those different opportunities and those different experiences to figure out more about myself, and then do more for God, and just see how that connected with my purpose, and just how those different things that really energized me and brought more oomph or life to my everyday life. So go ahead and tell us the third one, the third step to dating ourselves.
The third step would be to take a personality test. And this is something that I've been familiar with doing them a lot throughout life, you know, just if you do leadership stuff. But my previous church had a personality test that they offered in one of the classes that they had to become a member. And those tests are so affirming for who you are. You can begin to see different patterns and trends in your behavior, in the way you relate to other people, in the way you handle life's tasks or challenges. Are you the life of the party? Are you energized by people? Do you prefer 1 to 2 people, more intimate settings? Are you very logical in your thought patterns? Are you spontaneous? Are you driven? Are you direct? Are you very organized? All of those things, when you begin to look at a description of your personality on paper, it's almost like a light bulb goes off and you're like, oh my gosh, that's why I act like that, you know? And you begin to see different traits in other people. You begin to understand how you relate with different personality types. And quite honestly, I was very methodical, not methodical, but logical in terms of my spouse. When I met my husband, I had already begun to, in my head, peg down what my husband was going to be like. Okay. Because my previous pastor, he used to talk about how much opposites attract. So I knew that I was a life of the party type of person. I knew I was very direct and driven. So I assumed that a marriage with somebody just like me wasn't going to work.
That's a good assumption.
I was right, because I was right. Anyway, so when my husband approached me right off the bat, I was thinking this could work out, because he was my polar opposite. You know, before he ever said a word to me, I looked at him. He had on glasses, and nothing wrong with glasses. I wear glasses now.
Don't hate on glasses.
I mean,
now.
He was like, he was plaid shirt, cotton dockers. He was straight laced. And the way he presented himself to me was very much in that kind of same frame or whatnot. And I said to myself, yes, I'll go out with you, because I was already thinking about his personality, thinking about his uniqueness and how it would mesh well with me.
Yeah.
And had I not have been keenly aware about myself, you know, I think, let me say this. When we don't know ourselves and how we're wired and how we're shaped, then we're kind of wide open to any man. Any man will fit. And that's not a good place to be. That's not a good place to be. God was unique and intentional. He was very intentional with creating us. He was very intentional with giving us our personality and our skill set, our abilities, our passions, which means we cannot open ourselves up to any man. We need to be intentional about the man that we choose to submit to or to partner with, to do life with. And you can't do that if you don't know yourself.
Good point.
Right. So I was able to say, yes, I'll go out on a date with you, because I was already thinking very deeply about who this person was that was approaching me. I was thinking about his personality. And he was thinking about it too. He thought about it too.
Yeah, we had a similar thing happen in our church as far as like taking like a personality test. We actually took a spiritual gifts test assessment as well. And so that was really cool to go through and as a church just discuss the results and figure out how we can really organize ourselves to do ministry and stuff after that. But yeah, in addition to a personality test, might want to check out spiritual gifts test, see how God's gifted you to serve within the body.
Girl, you're in my extra notes, my extra list. I put that down there. Yeah, and I would just add to that you can just Google it. Yeah. You can Google spiritual gifts test, and like a ton of them will come up for you to take and see, what are your spiritual giftings.
Yep. All right, what's our next step today? Step forward to dating ourselves.
The next step would be read. And I can't read. Read.
I thought you said weed. I was like, wait, what?
No, don't do weed. They'll be like, what? She said weed. No, not weed.
On a Christian podcast.
As in red. As in the color. R as in the color red. EAD.
You're funny.
Because then you won't know who you are. And you'll be like, what day is it? Let alone who am I?
You better stop.
Bring it back. But no, in addition to reading the word, reading books. And I love me some nonfiction, girl. I love nonfiction, but there's just reading, we can discover more about ourselves. We can connect to, if we're reading fiction, we can connect to characters and look at their behaviors and learn something about them, get in a book club. And then most certainly we can learn things when we read nonfiction books. And crazy. And when I started this blog, it kind of started out of me wanting to unearth everything I could about father wounds. So I started reading. If somebody said father anything, I was picking it up. I read Bringing Up Girls by Dr. James Dobson. I read another book called Whatever Happened to Daddy's Little Girl, The Impact of Fatherlessness on Black Women. I read another book. I read books by Joyce Myers and Beth Moore, So Long in Security. I was just reading everything I could possibly get my hands on because I wanted to know what was going on with me. I wanted to know about my woundedness. Not that reading is just for woundedness, but I wanted to know what I could do about it. Yeah. I did not want to, even though I was already married, but that's aside. But had I have had the revelation that I had when I was married and I started doing all that nonfiction reading, I would have done it prior to.
I think... sorry. Go ahead. I think one of the best books I ever read in my life or had such a huge impact on me was The Search for Significance by Robert. I think it's Robert McKee. Yeah. So good. I can't tell you how many ways, and even on the topic of not finding your identity in relationships or being dependent on other people, he really dives deep into that. So I suggest you get that book if you just want to really just learn more about the spiritual remedies behind a lot of the mental and emotional problems that we have.
Girl, yes. I can't say enough about it, honestly. In terms of delving into the why we do what we do. For example, confrontation. How do you respond with confrontation? Do you retreat? Do you lash out? Are you a bulldog? Are you a chihuahua? What happens here? How do you respond with rejection? How do you respond when your feelings are hurt? How do you respond when you are at the top of your game? Do you have pride? All these things that we can kind of just ignore or dismiss or be like, that's just how I am. When you get married, Lord have mercy, Jesus, thank you. It's not just going to be that's just how I am, because now you got another person in your close, intimate, personal space looking at you saying something ain't right with that, and you're like, no, something is right with this. I've been like this my whole life, but then it's not going to fly because now you're like two pieces of sandpaper constantly rubbing yourself. So before you get married, it's best It is best to read everything you can get your hands on, devour it, so that you can know everything there is to know about you, good, bad, ugly, indifferent, and try to better yourself as best as you can. So get all that out of read.
Yeah. So yeah, and before we move on to is it 5 now? We're on number 5, right?
I think we're at 5.
Yeah. Before I move on to number 5, I'm just gonna throw out for our married ladies some books. Besides The Search for Significance, whether you're single or married, you need to read that thing right there, girl. But you can also read The 5 Love Languages. I'm sure everybody told you to read that, but for real, just sit down and read it. Can you think of another one for married women?
Yes. Captivating, Unveiling the Mystery of a Woman's Soul by Stacy and John Eldridge. Also, P. Bunny Wilson's, this isn't specifically for marriage, but she wrote Betrayal's Baby. She also wrote the something about submission, and I can't think of it right now. I can't think of it right now. Just look up P. Bunny Wilson. And Love and Respect by Dr. Egret.
Oh, yes. That's such a good one. Love and Respect. Oh, my gosh. If y'all can master that,
you're good. You're straight.
You're going to be straight. Yeah. All right, number 5.
I read it. I went to the conference and I'm still like, I missed it right there. I messed up.
Yeah. All right, number 5.
Okay, number 5. And let me just say, if you go to my site and look for this post, I realized that I had misnumbered. So I'm sorry. But I went back and added one and I put right. And I was just basically saying that writing is not just for the writer, but journal writing is a great way to discover more about yourself, especially in times where you may not be able to articulate your thoughts and your feelings the way you would want to out loud with someone. When you begin to write, or when you begin to answer questions or respond to journal prompts, you will be like, oh my goodness, I was feeling anxious about this. I've been feeling anxious this whole time. I didn't realize that. Or I've been dealing with anger. I've been frustrated. Or you will begin to see patterns in your life. Again, you will begin to see the way God operates in your life. Like in 19XYZ, God did this. And then in such and such, 2000, such and such, he did that. And look at the patterns and how God tends to operate in my life this way. Or I tend to behave this way. There's so many things, again, when you're still and you are giving yourself the time to think and to process, to reflect and to write, that comes out about yourself that you don't readily see when you're so busy and you're filling yourself from one relationship, one date, one event to the next, and you're never alone. You're never quiet. You're never by yourself. Turn the radio off. Turn it off. Turn off the podcast, and just get alone by yourself and write.
Yep, so therapeutic. I have journals right now on my bookshelf that some of them, girl, I'm scared to open because thinking about where I'm scared to open them, but at the same time, when I finally do, I'm like, man, God brought me a long way.
Mighty long way. I need to burn them. Before I die, I need to gather up my grandkids and be like, little William, go to the garage and get that big bin of journals. Yeah. And light it, cover it with kerosene and burn them all because I have put so much.
But yes, it's so true. Like, and then there's days when something's bothering me, I sit down and write, and I just have these epiphanies about, this is what's been wrong with me this entire time. But exactly. Okay, so what's our step number 6, or your tip for us, or your 6th tip?
My 6th suggestion is to take a risk. And I think that's the greatest one on the list. One of them is because you just never know. I was listening to somebody the other day that was talking about the purposes of God in your life, and how, and I can see this in my own life, how I used to think the purpose is just going to fall from the sky, drop in my lap, and bam, there it is, and I'm just going to be operating in the purposes of God. But it doesn't happen like that. Like, God doesn't happen like that. God tells you to do something, or he gives you a premonition or idea, a thought, and then you act on it. You don't always know what you're doing. You don't always look cute.
And you don't have to have it all figured out.
You don't have it all figured out. You may not be pretty. You might look crazy, but you just do what you believe that God has told you to do. And then as you're out there on the water, here comes some help. And someone says, well, you can also try to do XYZ like this, or here's a resource, or here's some money, or can I partner with you, or I'd like to interview you, or I'd like to see this XYZ. This is how it happens. And before you know it, you're doing things that you never thought you would do, that now you're like, I can't live without.
Yep. So true.
Perfect example is this blog that I'm doing. I never saw myself being a blogger. I didn't have a desire to do it. I didn't know the technical aspect of how to get this thing up and running. But I was kind of thrusted into this place after I lost my book that I wanted to write, Lost Everything. And a friend of mine said, well, why don't you do a blog? And I was thinking to myself, I can't do it, or I don't. I had every excuse in the book, as we always do, of why we can't do it. For some, it might be, well, I'm going to do this when I get married, or this is something I wanted to do with my spouse. But truth of the matter is, we don't know when the spouse is coming, or we don't know when whatever it is that we're waiting on is going to happen.
Life will allow you to write a book with your spouse.
Right. So you just have to do what God is telling you in your heart to do now.
Yep.
And as you do it, he will lead you. He will guide you, and you'll discover things about yourself that you never knew possible. God will use you in ways you never imagined. And it is the most fulfilling, most scary, most abundantly blessed place to be.
Yep. That reminds me of actually the story of how I actually applied to write for Proverbs 31, like the first 5. I remember waiting to the last. Thank you. Girl, your trip. I waited to the last day because I was so scared to apply. And I asked my husband, I said, do you think I should do this? Do you think I should try and do this? I don't know. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So I remember staying up all night to finish that in time. And I sent it to them right when it was due. And at first, because they had so many entries, there was a day they said that they were going to contact you by this day if you had got in, and they didn't contact me. So I was just like, I guess, I didn't have my hopes that high anyways. Then a week later, they were like, hey, we're reaching out because we wanted you to write. We had so many people apply, so we didn't know. And so anyways, just thinking about how I was so scared to take, that was a risk to me. I didn't feel like getting told no, so I didn't want to feel like I was going to be a failure or get rejected or whatever. And then now to be at this point where I do write with them, and I've just grown so much through writing and through the edits and feedback and things like that. And it's increased my confidence in the gifts that God's placed inside of me to do things that do higher or do more risky things, So it's just crazy how when you take that one step, God will multiply
Magnify
that.
it, yes.
Yeah. So you told us our steps to dating, how to date ourselves, and just these are self-care things that we can do, whether we're single or married, and especially for women who are trying to just get out of that place where they might have been distracted by lust and now are trying to fill their time and energy and focus on these things that God is trying to do new in their lives. But I do love this quote from your original post. It says, "Contentment is not the place we arrive at when we get the man." I don't know how you get 2.5 kids. I don't know how you get half of a kid.
Dog.
A dog. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, let me finish the quote. Because I was like, "What you going to? How you get half a child?"
The cat. Some people might have a fish, gerbil, hamster.
All right, okay. That I'll let it slide. I'll let it slide. So it says, "Contentment is not the place we arrive at once we get the man, the 2.5 kids, house, and picket fence." I want you to just elaborate on that, because this is so true, and I think we all need to get this.
Well, I think it came out of just being married. When you're not married, you're dreaming about getting married, or many people are dreaming about getting married and the wedding and what that's going to look like. Then after you get married, then you're dreaming about the kids and you're dreaming about this. And you have to reach a place where, yes, we dream, but you learn how to be at peace with the present. I am not speaking as someone who has done that, but I'm learning to do that. I'm trying to begin to catch myself when I begin to say, "Oh, I wish if such and such," or "Oh, if this was such and such," because we're always going to have imperfect situations. But there are blessings, actually abundant blessings, all around us, whatever season of life we find ourselves in, whether we're single or married, whether we are just getting out of a breakup or we're heading into a relationship. There are blessings around us. And the moment we are able to make peace with the present and open our eyes and look with clarity, is the moment that we'll begin to truly know contentment.
Yeah, I really believe the key to being content in whatever season you're in, or being able to pivot, when God takes you from this place to this place, from this season to this season, it goes back to the first, that some of the steps you were mentioning, and how to date yourself, just being really in tune and focused on the Lord, and just trusting that in whatever situation, whatever place you're in, that God is going to continue to keep you and continue to sustain you. But if your focus is on God, then it's not on whatever in whatever you might lack personally to get yourself through that situation. But knowing that whether you're married or single, or in this happy season of life or not, because life in general, life in its stresses and its distractions, or the happy times and bad times, but you best believe it keep rolling, whether you single or you're married. Even in your marriage, you need to be prepared to be at this place spiritually, where you can just trust and be satisfied by God's presence and God's love in your life. And so,
that's so good. I was thinking, I just had this visual of an anchor tied to a big cruise ship, or any size boat, for that matter. But if there's no anchor, that ship is just going to drift. It's just going to drift and float on wherever it's going to go. And that's kind of how we are in our lives at our different seasons of life. If we don't have anything anchoring us down, I know for myself personally, if I'm not anchored to God's word, I begin to drift in my mind. drift with discontentment, drift with complaining, drift with, frustration. If we don't have anything anchoring us in our singleness, we might drift back to our old boyfriend. He might call us at the right time. Yeah, I'm saying he calls us at the right time. We're lonely. We just got to watching XYZ love story.
You said.
And here we are back. But the word of God is our anchor to keep us focused on what matters. Mm-hmm. And it matters that we pursue him and that we get to know who we are, who he's created us to be, so that we ultimately can live our best life and live that abundant life that he talks about in John 10:10.
Yeah, that's good. And thank you so much for sharing your awesome tips and suggestions on how we can date ourselves, how we can get over that lie that our worth is tied into our relationships. Instead love who God has created us to be and become, just daily taking one step at a time, becoming more of who it is that God has created us to be. So before we go, will you go ahead and pray for our listeners, and then I'll tell them how they can get in contact with you and get your awesome ebook. What's it called?
Hope for Women with Father Wounds.
Hope for women with father wounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love to pray for you all. Okay. God, I just thank you so much for each woman, each person that is listening by way of podcast or watching on YouTube, Lord. And I thank you, God, that you are so intentional about every person, that you know us by name. You know the hairs on our head, God. You know our unique makeup. You know our personality, our spiritual gifts. You know all of this about us. And you call us daughter. God, you love us. You desire to spend time with us, and you want us to be known and to be loved and valued and cherished by you. I pray that for every woman, God, that's listening, and maybe they find themselves struggling with lust. God, maybe they find themselves in relationships and they know that they really don't know who they are. They know that they have settled for men that don't really know themselves, nor do they know them. God, I pray for those women that you would give them the courage to make steps in the right direction, that you would give them the courage to spend time with you and to trust you, and to trust that if you desire that they be alone for a season, that you will honor that time and that you will do immeasurably more than they could ask or imagine. God, for women who are afraid to be alone, afraid to end relationships, afraid to discover about themselves, afraid to heal their wounds, afraid to forgive. God, I pray, Father, that you would give them the willingness to trust you. To trust, God, that Romans 8:28 is true, that says, and we know that God is working for the good of them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. God, that you have a plan, God, for every woman. I pray for peace, and I pray, God, that she would fall so madly in love with herself, first with you, God, and then with herself, that in no way would she ever compromise in her relationships with the opposite sex. God, I thank you for this time and for the fruit that will come from this conversation, and for the awesome things you're doing with Life Before Eternity and Titania. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
I should have told you I'm long-winded. I should have said, give me a time limit, put the timer on your phone so that I won't go too long.
No, it's all good. Thank you so much for sharing today. Y'all, if you want to connect with Kia and you want to download her free ebook, Hope for the Woman with Father Wounds, then visit her blog, fatherswap.com. Additionally, you can find her on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Her handle is @FatherSwap. So thank you so much for listening today.